Hi everybody, happy Wednesday to you. I'm happy to be starting chapter 6, which is titled The Bogart in the Wardrobe. Just a reminder that at the end of chapter 6, which was titled Talons and Tea Leaves, Hagrid had that horrible experience with Malfoy getting attacked by the hippogriff, and so when Harry, Ron, and Hermione went down to check on him to see what had happened as a result, they found him. He was in not the best shape. And so at the very end, he actually realizes, that it's getting dark and Harry is down in his hut and he's really not supposed to be out walking around with Sirius Black on the loose. And so this is how that chapter ended. "What do you think you're doing, eh?" he roared, so suddenly that they jumped a foot in the air. "You're not to go wandering around after dark, Harry, and you two letting him." Hagrid strode over to Harry, grabbed his arm, and pulled him to the door. "Come on," Hagrid said angrily. "I'm taking you all back up to school, and don't let me catch you walking down to see me after dark again. I'm not worth that." And that's how the chapter ended. So chapter 7 is titled The Bogart in the Wardrobe, and we're gonna hopefully at some point find out what the Bogart is. So this is gonna be part 1 of something that we'll finish up tomorrow. Malfoy didn't reappear in classes until late on Thursday morning, when the Slytherins and Gryffindors were halfway through double potions. He swaggered into the dungeon, his right arm covered in bandages and bound up in a sling, acting, in Harry's opinion, as though he were the heroic survivor of some dreadful battle. "How is it, Draco?" simpered Pansy Parkinson. "Does it hurt much?" "Yeah," said Malfoy, putting on a brave sort of grimace, but Harry saw him wink at Crabbe and Goyle when Pansy looked away. Settle down," said Professor Snape idly. Harry and Ron scowled at each other. Snape wouldn't have said settle down if they'd walked in late. He'd have given them detention. But Malfoy had always been able to get away with anything in Snape's class. Snape was head of Slytherin House and generally favored his own students above others. They were making a new potion today, a shrinking solution. Malfoy set up his cauldron right next to Harry and Ron so that they were preparing their ingredients on the same table. "Sir," Malfoy called, "Sir, I'll need help cutting up these daisy roots because of my arm." "Weasley, cut up Malfoy's roots for him," said Snape without looking up. Ron went brick red. "There is nothing wrong with your arm," he hissed at Malfoy. Malfoy smirked across the table. "Weasley, you heard Professor Snape. Cut up these roots." Ron seized his knife, pulled Malfoy's roots toward him, and began to chop them roughly so that they were all different sizes. "Professor," drawled Malfoy, "Weasley's mutilating my roots, sir." Snape approached their table, stared down his hooked nose at the roots, then gave Ron an unpleasant smile from beneath his long, greasy black hair. "Change roots with Malfoy, Weasley." "But sir," Ron had spent the last quarter of an hour carefully shredding his own roots into exactly equal pieces. "Now," said Snape in his most dangerous voice. Ron shoved his own beautifully cut roots across the table at Malfoy, then took up the knife again. "And sir, I'll need his shrivel fig skinned," said Malfoy, his voice full of malicious laughter. "Potter, you can skin Malfoy's shrivel fig," said Snape, giving Harry the look of loathing he always reserved just for him. Harry took Malfoy's shrivel fig as Ron began to try and repair the damage to the roots he now had to use. Harry skinned the shrivel figs as fast as he could and flung it back across the table at Malfoy without speaking. Malfoy was smirking more broadly than ever. "Seen your pal Hagrid lately?" he asked them quietly. "None of your business," said Ron jerkily without looking up. "I'm afraid he won't be a teacher much longer," said Malfoy in a tone of mock sorrow. "Father's not very happy about my injury." "Keep talking, Malfoy, and I'll give you a real injury," snarled Ron. "He's complained to the school governors and to the Minister of Magic. Father's got a lot of influence, and a lasting injury like this," he gave a huge fake sigh. "Who knows if my arm will ever be the same again?" So that's why you're putting it on, said Harry, accidentally beheading a dead caterpillar because his hand was shaking in anger. To try to get Hagrid fired? Well, said Malfoy, lowering his voice to a whisper, partly, Potter. But there are other benefits too. Weasley, slice my caterpillars for me. A few cauldrons away, Neville was in trouble. Neville regularly went to pieces in potions lessons. It was his worst subject, and his great fear Professor Snape made things 10 times worse. His potion, which was supposed to be bright acid green, had turned orange, Longbottom, said Snape, ladling some up and allowing it to splash back into the cauldron so that everyone could see. Orange? Tell me, boy, does anything penetrate that thick skull of yours? Didn't you hear me say quite clearly that only one rat spleen was needed? Didn't I state plainly that a dash of leech juice would suffice? What do I have to do to make you understand, Longbottom? Neville was pink and trembling. He looked as though he was on the verge of tears. Please, sir, said Hermione, please, I could help Neville put it right. I don't remember asking you to show off, Miss Granger, said Snape coldly, and Hermione went as pink as Neville. Longbottom, at the end of this lesson, we will feed a few drops of this potion to your toad and see what happens. Perhaps that will encourage you to do it properly. Snape moved away, leaving Neville breathless with fear. Help me, he moaned to Hermione. Hey, Harry, said Seamus Finnegan, leaning over to borrow Harry's brass scales. Have you heard? Daily Prophet this morning. They reckon Sirius Black has been sighted. Where? Said Harry and Ron quickly, on the other side of the table. Malfoy looked up, listening closely. Not too far from here, said Seamus, who looked excited. It was a muggle who saw him. Of course, she didn't really understand. The muggles just think he's an ordinary criminal, don't they? So she phoned the telephone hotline. By the time the Minister of Magic got there, he was gone. Not too far from here, Ron repeated, looking significantly at Harry. He turned around and saw Malfoy watching closely. What, Malfoy? Need something else skinned? But Malfoy's eyes were shining malevolently, and they were fixed on Harry. He leaned across the table. Thinking of trying to catch Black single-handed, Potter? Yeah, that's right, said Harry offhandedly. Malfoy's thin mouth was curving in a mean smile. Of course, if it was me, he said quietly, I'd have done something before now. I wouldn't be staying in school like a good boy. I'd be out there looking for him. What are you talking about, Malfoy? Said Ron roughly. Don't you know, Potter? Breathed Malfoy, his pale eyes narrowed. Know what? Malfoy let out a low, sneering laugh. Maybe you'd rather not risk your neck, he said. Want to leave it to the Dementors, do you? But if it was me, I'd want revenge. I'd hunt him down myself. What are you talking about? Said Harry angrily. But at that moment, Snape called, You should have finished adding your ingredients by now. This potion needs to stew before it can be drunk, so clear away while it simmers, and then we'll test Longbottom's. Crabbe and Goyle laughed openly, watching Neville sweat as he stirred his potion feverishly. Hermione was muttering instructions to him out of the corner of her mouth so that Snape wouldn't see. Harry and Ron packed away their unused ingredients and went to wash their hands and ladles in the stone basin in the corner. What did Malfoy mean? Harry muttered to Ron as he struck his hands under the icy jet that poured from the gargoyle's mouth. Why would I want revenge on Black? He hasn't done anything to me. Yet. He's making it up, said Ron savagely. He's trying to make you do something stupid. The end of the lesson in sight, Snape strode over to Neville, who was cowering by his cauldron. Everyone, gather round, said Snape, his black eyes glittering, and watch what happens to Longbottom's toad. If he has managed to produce a shrinking solution, it will shrink to a tadpole. If, as I don't doubt, he's done it wrong, his toad is likely to be poisoned. The Gryffindors watched fearfully. The Slytherins looked excited. Snape picked up Trevor the Toad in his left hand and dipped a small spoon into Neville's potion, which was now green. He trickled a few drops down Trevor's throat. There was a moment of hushed silence in which Trevor gulped. Then there was a small pop, and Trevor the Tadpole was wriggling in Snape's palm. The Gryffindors burst into applause. Snape, looking sour, pulled a small bottle from the pocket of his robe, poured a few drops on top of Trevor, and he reappeared suddenly fully grown. 5 points from Gryffindor, said Snape, which wiped the smiles from every face. I told you not to help him, Miss Granger. Class dismissed. Harry, Ron, and Hermione climbed the steps to the entrance hall. Harry was still thinking about what Malfoy had said, while Ron was seething about Snape. 5 points from Gryffindor because the potion was all right? Why didn't you lie, Hermione? You should have at least said Neville did it by himself. Hermione didn't answer. Ron looked around. Hey, where is she? Harry turned too. They were at the top of the steps now, watching the rest of the class pass them, heading for the Great Hall and lunch. She was right behind us, said Ron, frowning. Malfoy passed them, walking between Crabbe and Goyle. He smirked at Harry and disappeared. There she is, said Harry. Hermione was panting slightly, hurrying up the stairs. One hand clutched to her bag, the other seemed to be tucking something down the front of her robes. How did you do that, said Ron. What? Said Hermione, joining them. 1 minute you were right behind us, the next moment you were back at the bottom of the stairs again? What? Hermione looked slightly confused. Oh, I had to go back for something. Oh no! A seam had split on Hermione's bag. Harry wasn't surprised. He could see it was crammed with at least a dozen large and heavy books. Why are you carrying all these around with you? Ron asked her. Do you know how many subjects I'm taking? Said Hermione breathlessly. Couldn't hold these for me, could you? But Ron was turning over the books she handed him, looking at the covers. You haven't got any of these subjects today. It's only Defense Against the Dark Arts this afternoon. Oh, yes, said Hermione vaguely, but she packed all the books back into her bag just the same. I hope there's something good for lunch. I'm starving, she added, and she marched off toward the Great Hall. Do you get the feeling Hermione's not telling us something? Ron asked Harry. And that's where I'm actually going to leave off for today. So it is a little curious that Hermione does seem to be doing something a little bit mysterious and secretive. But I can't even imagine what that might be. Like, why she's got all these subjects that are at the same time, and she's carrying all these books for classes that she couldn't possibly be taking. And so that's hopefully something that we will be able to figure out, along with the Bogart in the wardrobe, because we did not get to any Bogart. I am curious to see that if they are heading to Defense Against the Dark Arts, the new professor that was on the train with them, Professor Lupin, is going to be the one teaching them, and I'm curious to see what kind of Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher he is, because after Quirrell in the first book and Lockhart in the second one, I would think you could only go up from there. So in the meantime, have a wonderful Wednesday, and I can't wait to read again with you tomorrow on Thursday, and we'll finish up the chapter. See you guys. Bye.